My name is Hannah Mitchell. I grew up in a small riverfront town in Wisconsin, where the winters were long and the whole town felt like family. As a kid, I thought my life was perfect. My dad, Robert, taught math at the high school, always scribbling equations on napkins. My mom, Susan, worked at an insurance office but made time to bake cookies with me on Sundays. We weren't rich, but we had enough. I was their only child, and for a while I felt loved in that deep, safe way every kid craves. Dad would take me stargazing by the river, pointing out constellations with a flashlight. Mom would sing old country songs while we made peanut butter sandwiches for picnics. On summer nights, we'd sit on the back porch, eating grilled hot dogs and listening to crickets hum in the warm air. I'd chase fireflies until my jar glowed, and they'd laugh, cheering me on. Those moments felt like forever, our little family against the world. I'd fall asleep to the sound of the river lapping nearby, believing nothing could break us apart. Back then, I didn't know how fragile it all was. I thought love like that lasted. I was too young to see the cracks forming, too happy to notice how one cold night would change everything. Those evenings by the river, with stars above and my parents' smiles, were my whole world. I didn't know I'd spend years chasing that feeling again. Everything changed on a bitter February night when I was 9. I woke up to the sound of tires crunching snow in the driveway and hushed voices downstairs. My Aunt Clara burst in, her face pale, telling me to grab my coat and shoes. "Your mom's at the hospital, Hannah," she said, her voice tight. "Your baby sister came early." I didn't understand much, just that something big was happening. They named her Chloe, born 2 months premature, so tiny she looked like a doll wrapped in wires in the hospital incubator. I stood on tiptoes to see her, but Mom pushed me back gently. "She's fragile, sweetie. We can't risk germs." That was the first time I felt like an outsider in my own family. When Chloe finally came home, the house turned into a different place. The air smelled like bleach, and Mom taped signs on the fridge about washing hands. Air purifiers hummed all night, and I wasn't allowed near Chloe's crib. "She needs to stay safe," Dad said, his eyes always on her. If I so much as coughed, Mom would pack my bag and send me to Grandma Dot's house. At first I liked it. Grandma Dot let me eat chocolate chip pancakes and showed me how to stitch patterns on old fabric. But soon, I realized I was being sent away because I didn't fit anymore. Mom stopped baking with me, too busy checking Chloe's temperature. Dad didn't talk about stars. He was reading medical books instead. Once I showed Mom a drawing I made of our river, hoping she'd pin it up like she used to. She just nodded, distracted, and said, "That's nice, Hannah," before turning to Chloe's monitor. I started to feel like a ghost in my own home, unseen unless I was in the way. That winter, I learned my family wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to Chloe, and I was just someone who had to be careful not to break it. By the time I was 12, I knew I'd never get my old family back. Chloe was the center of everything, and I was just a shadow in the house. I tried to win my parents' attention with good grades and little things, like cleaning the kitchen without being asked. In 5th grade, I won a ribbon for a painting of the river at the school art fair. I ran home, holding it up like a prize. Mom glanced at it, then said, "That's great, Hannah, but Chloe's got a fever. Can you keep it down?" Dad just patted my head and turned back to Chloe's doctor's notes. It stung, but I kept trying. I joined the art club, got straight A's, even memorized every state capital to impress Dad. Nothing worked. Their eyes were always on Chloe, making sure she was okay. I started spending more time alone in my room, sketching old houses and reading library books about artists who made beautiful things from nothing. Those books felt like friends, showing me a world where I could matter. At 14, I decided I couldn't wait for my parents to notice me. I walked into Ruth's tailor shop, a cozy little store downtown with a bell that jingled when you opened the door. Mrs. Ruth, the owner, had gray hair and kind eyes. I asked for a job, expecting her to laugh at a kid like me. Instead, she handed me a broom and said, "Show me what you can do." I swept floors, organized thread spools, and learned to hem pants. Mrs. Ruth taught me how to spot quality in fabric, how a single stitch could tell a story. When I fixed a customer's torn jacket perfectly, she smiled and said, "Hannah, You've got a gift. Don't let anyone tell you different." Those words were like a warm blanket after years of feeling cold. I worked after school, saving every dollar in a tin box under my bed. At home, I stayed quiet, tiptoeing around Chloe's naps and doctor visits. Nobody asked where I went or why my hands smelled like lavender soap from the shop. I didn't mind. Mrs. Ruth's praise and the hum of the sewing machine gave me something my family didn't. A place where I wasn't invisible. I wasn't just surviving. I was building something for myself, stitch by stitch, even if nobody else could see it. High school was when I stopped waiting for my parents to see me. I was 16, still working at Ruth's tailor shop, saving every penny for a future I could control. I knew college was my way out, but I didn't expect Mom or Dad to help. They were too busy with Chloe's doctor appointments and her new dance classes. So I took charge. I spent lunch breaks in the school library, researching scholarships and filling out applications. I wrote essays about my love for art and how Mrs. Ruth taught me to find beauty in overlooked things, like a frayed quilt or a faded scarf. I didn't tell anyone, not even Grandma Dot, because I was afraid saying it out loud might jinx it. Mrs. Ruth was the only one I trusted to proofread my essays. She'd sit with me after closing, her glasses slipping down her nose, and say, "Hannah, you write like you've got a fire inside you." That kept me going. I applied to 12 schools, every one a reach, and figured out financial aid forms on my own. When acceptance letters came, I'd check the mailbox before anyone got home, hiding them in my backpack. The day I got into the University of Wisconsin-Madison with a full-ride scholarship for art history, I cried in the shop's back room. Mrs. Ruth hugged me tight, smelling like lavender and thread. My parents didn't notice. I told Mom about the scholarship over dinner, and she said, "That's nice, Hannah," while cutting Chloe's chicken because she was too tired to do it herself. College was freedom. I dove into art history, learning about pottery and textiles from centuries ago, each piece telling a story of someone long gone. After graduation, I moved to Chicago for an unpaid internship at a small museum. It was tough, living on instant noodles and sharing a cramped apartment, but I loved it. I cataloged old ceramics and weavings, noticing details others missed, like a faint mark on a clay bowl that hinted at its maker. One day, I spotted a chipped vase, labeled as decorative low value. Something about its glaze felt special. I stayed late, cross-referencing books and online archives, and found it was a rare piece from a 19th century Potawatomi artisan. The museum reappraised it at $5,000, and my boss, Mr. Daniels, called me sharp. That moment lit a spark. I started volunteering for extra projects, learning how to authenticate crafts by their materials and techniques. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was good at something. Nobody at home knew. Chloe was starting college, switching majors every semester, and my parents were too focused on her to ask about me. But I didn't need their praise. I was building a life where I could stand tall, one careful step at a time. After the museum internship, I knew I'd found my calling. I was 23, still scraping by in Chicago, but those old vases and woven rugs spoke to me in a way nothing else did. I wanted to keep uncovering their stories, so I took a leap and started my own business, River Thread. It was just me at first, working out of a tiny rented office above a coffee shop in Madison. The desk wobbled and the lamp flickered, but I didn't care. I was building something mine. I specialized in authenticating and restoring handmade crafts, pottery, textiles, anything with a history. My first big break came when a local antique dealer brought in a faded quilt, thinking it was just a pretty blanket. I noticed the stitching was unusual, almost like a code. I spent nights researching, digging through library records, and found it was a rare Underground Railroad quilt from the 1850s, used to signal safe houses. When it sold at auction for $30,000, the dealer called me a miracle worker. That put River Thread on the map. I started getting calls from collectors and small museums. I hired Lila, a history grad with a knack for spotting fakes, and we moved to a bigger office. By 26, I had 3 locations, Madison, Minneapolis, and Denver, handling contracts worth millions. One day, I authenticated a set of clay pots mislabeled as folk art. They were actually pre-Columbian, from a lost pueblo in New Mexico, and fetched $75,000 at a Denver auction. My name started showing up in industry emails with words like expert next to it. It felt unreal, like I was living someone else's life, but I never forgot where I came from. My parents still thought I was figuring things out, and I let them. They were too busy with Chloe, who was now in her third college major, fashion design. Nobody asked about my work, so I didn't tell them. Instead, I started sending money home. It began with $2,000 a month, then $5,000 when Chloe's tuition bills piled up. I set up automatic transfers from my business account labeled Family Support. Mom called once, saying, "Hannah, we got some extra cash in the bank. Must be a mistake." I just said, "It's not a mistake, Mom. Use it." She didn't ask where it came from, and I didn't explain. I knew they needed it. Dad's teacher salary couldn't cover Chloe's classes, her new apartment, or her study abroad trips. I didn't mind helping, I could afford it, and part of me still hoped they'd see me as more than the kid who faded into the background. But they didn't. Chloe posted photos online, showing off designer purses and cafe brunches, while Mom bragged to neighbors about her star daughter. I kept quiet, working late nights to verify a woven basket's origins or restore a cracked jug. Lila once asked why I didn't tell my family about river thread. I shrugged and said they wouldn't get it. Truth was, I was scared they'd only care about the money, not me, so I stayed silent, pouring my heart into every thread and shard, letting my work speak for me in a way my family never would. Christmas Eve was always a big deal at our house, with relatives packed around the dining table, laughing over mashed potatoes and Mom's pecan pie. I was 27, and River Thread was thriving, but I still showed up into these dinners, hoping for a flicker of the family I used to know. Nobody asked about my life, so I kept quiet, passing the gravy and smiling when Aunt Clara raved about Chloe's latest fashion design project. Chloe, now 19, was home from college, glowing as Mom bragged about her natural talent. I didn't mind until that night when everything unraveled. I'd stepped into the kitchen to check an email from a client about a $2 million auction contract for a rare Navajo weaving. My phone was charging on the counter, and Chloe, hunting for a charger, grabbed it. "Hannah, your phone's buzzing like crazy," she called, loud enough for everyone to hear. Before I could stop her, she swiped the screen and her eyes went wide. "Whoa, is this for real?" She turned the phone around, showing the email with River Thread's logo and numbers. My company's $10 million valuation, the auction deal, and a bank transfer confirmation for $5,000 to Mom and Dad's account. The room froze. Uncle Mike dropped his fork. Aunt Clara gasped. Chloe's face twisted, half shocked, half angry. "You're loaded," she said, voice sharp. Mom stood up, her chair scraping the floor. "Hannah, what is this?" I took a breath, heart pounding, and said, "It's my business. River Thread. I authenticate and restore crafts. That's what I do." Dad's face turned red. "You've got millions and you're just sitting on it?" he snapped. I tried to stay calm. "I've been sending you $5,000 every month for years. For Chloe's tuition, her apartment, everything. You never asked where it came from." Mom's hand flew to her mouth. "That was you?" she whispered, like it was impossible. Chloe slammed the phone down. "Why didn't you tell us? We're your family. I'm struggling with school and you're hiding this?" I looked at her, at the designer scarf around her neck, the one she'd posted about online last week. "Struggling?" I said, my voice steady but cold. "You just got back from Paris for spring break. I paid for that." The room erupted. Aunt Clara said I was selfish. Uncle Mike muttered about family duty. Dad shouted, "You let us think we were scraping by." Mom started crying, saying, "We could have used more help, Hannah. Chloe's dreams aren't cheap." I felt like I was 9 again, pushed out of my own home. But this time I wasn't backing down. "I gave you everything I could," I said, looking at Mom. "I paid for Chloe's college, her trips, even her car. And you never once asked how I was doing. You didn't even come to my college graduation." Chloe's eyes flashed. "So what? You think you're better than us because you've got money?" That hit hard, but I didn't flinch. "No, I just wanted you to see me." I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking. "I'm done. No more transfers. You figure it out." Mom gasped. "Hannah, you can't do that. We're counting on it." Dad slammed his hand on the table. "This isn't how family works." I looked around at their faces, angry, entitled, like I owed them my whole life. "Family doesn't ignore you for years and then demand your bank account," I said softly. I walked to the door, my coat over my arm. Chloe yelled, "You'll regret this," but I didn't turn back. Outside, the snow fell quietly, and for the first time, I felt lighter. I'd carried them long enough. As I drove away, my phone lit up with texts. Mom begging me to talk, Dad calling me ungrateful, Chloe saying I'd ruined her life. I turned it off. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at a small clay figurine Grandma Dot gave me years ago. It wasn't worth much, but it was mine. And so was my life now. No more hiding, no more paying for love I'd never get. After that Christmas Eve, I knew I couldn't go back. The texts kept coming, Mom pleading, Dad scolding, Chloe blaming me for everything. I powered off my phone and sat in my apartment, the silence louder than their words. I'd spent years carrying my family, but their anger showed me they didn't want me, just my money. I wasn't a kid anymore, begging for their love. I needed to protect myself. The next morning, I called James Carter, a lawyer who'd helped my clients with estate disputes. I showed him the messages, including Chloe's threats to make me pay. James didn't sugarcoat it. "You need a clean break, Hannah, legal and financial." He drafted cease and desist letters to my parents, Chloe, and even Aunt Clara, who'd started calling me heartless to neighbors. The letters were clear. No more contact, no more demands. I felt a pang signing them, but I knew it was right. I canceled the $5,000 monthly transfers and closed the bank account tied to my family. To keep River Thread safe, I moved my main office to a new building in Madison suburbs, with keycard entry and cameras. I didn't want surprises. I also changed my phone number and told Lila to screen all visitors claiming to be family. It hurt, but I couldn't risk them showing up, demanding cash or worse. Grandma Dot was the only one I kept close. When I told her everything, she sighed and said, "Hannah, you've been their anchor too long. It's time to sail free." She moved in with me for a few weeks, bringing her old sewing box and a tin of oatmeal cookies. We'd sit on my new porch, overlooking a quiet field, and she'd tell stories about her own fights for independence. Her strength made me feel less alone. I bought a small house nearby, nothing fancy, just a 2-bedroom with a big window facing the sunrise. I set up a home office with a wooden desk and a shelf for my favorite finds, a patched quilt, a clay bowl, things that reminded me why I loved my work. For the first time, I wasn't hiding who I was. I wore a woven bracelet Grandma Dot made me, not caring if it looked cheap compared to Chloe's designer stuff. My life was mine now, no apologies. The harassment stopped after James sent the letters, but I knew it wasn't over. Chloe posted vague things online, hinting at a greedy sister who abandoned her. I didn't respond. I was done fighting for their approval. Instead, I focused on River Thread, taking on bigger projects like authenticating a museum's textile collection. Lila and I worked late, laughing over coffee, building something real. Walking away from my family didn't erase the pain, but it gave me room to breathe. I wasn't the girl sent to Grandma's anymore, invisible, unless I was useful. I was Hannah, and I was enough. A year after that Christmas Eve, I finally felt like I was living for myself. River Thread was growing faster than I'd ever dreamed. We signed a deal to authenticate a textile collection for a major Chicago museum, and I hired 2 new appraisers to keep up. One morning, I got an email inviting me to speak at a national conference in Boston about preserving Native American crafts. I stared at the screen, my coffee going cold, me, the girl who used to hide her sketches, speaking to hundreds of experts. I said yes without hesitating. It wasn't just about my work, it was about proving I didn't need anyone's permission to shine. I moved into my new house, a cozy place with a view of the fields, and set up a corner for Grandma Dot's things. She stayed longer than planned, her laughter filling the rooms as we sorted old fabrics together. One night, she held up a worn table runner she'd stitched decades ago and said, "Hannah, you didn't just survive. You built something beautiful from scraps." Her words stuck with me like a quiet promise I'd kept to myself. I started wearing the woven bracelet she made me every day, a reminder of where I came from and who I'd become. My family's silence didn't sting as much anymore. Chloe's online posts about her tough life got fewer likes, and Mom's calls stopped after James's letters. I didn't check their social media or wait for apologies. I was done chasing their approval. Instead, I poured my energy into River Thread. Watching Lila grow into a sharp appraiser and our Denver office land a contract with a big auction house. Clients started mentioning my name in industry circles, saying I had an eye for the rare. It felt good, but not because of the praise. It was because I'd built this life on my own terms. One quiet morning, I found Grandma Dot's table runner in a box and hung it on my office wall next to a small pottery shard I'd saved from my first museum job. They weren't fancy, but they were mine, pieces of a journey that started when I was invisible. Now, standing in my own home, planning a speech for Boston, I wasn't that girl anymore. I was Hannah Mitchell, someone who'd learned to love herself without needing a family to say she was enough. The world was wide open, and I was ready to step into it, carrying my story like a badge of honor. You don't need a crowd to cheer you on to make your mark. If my story resonates with you, take it as a reminder. You're enough, just as you are. Want more stories that lift you up and inspire you to chase your truth? Hit that subscribe button and join our community on YouTube. Don't miss out on the next tale of courage and heart. It might just change how you see yourself.